Hello, I'm Robert Magnus, and I'll be talking about the evolution and future of video game music. So, first, let me just talk about myself. I'm an 8th grade student. I believe in a bright future for all of us. I'm a person who likes to try new things, but most of all, I am a gamer. And when I play video games, I love listening to the music of those games. But what I see very commonly is that people mute the music of their video games when they play. And I think they're really taking away some of the parts of the game that are the most atmospheric and enjoyable. So, to start things off about video game music, I'm going to go over the styles of video game music. There is 8-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit, CGS, and orchestra. Let's start with 8-bit. 8-bit is named after the computing power of early video game consoles such as the NES, the Game Boy, and the Game Boy Color. To give you an idea of what this sounds like, here is a clip from The Legend of Zelda. So as you just heard, it sounds a bit pixelated. It sounds like one instrument is playing the entire track, but you could definitely hear that there were different notes being played and that there was both a melody and a harmony, which is what most pieces of music have. So it might not sound like it's something special, but it still sounds amazing. Moving on. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Moving on, we have 16-bit. This is also named after the computing power of early video game consoles, such as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the Sega Genesis, and the Game Boy Advance. And as the name would imply, this computing power is two times the amount of an 8-bit system. So with that in mind, you would think the sound quality is slightly better. It is. To give you an example of what this sounds like, here is a track from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. So, it sounds pixelated, but not as pixelated as the 8-bit example. And unlike the 8-bit example, you could hear two instruments in that. You could hear something that sounded like electric keys and something that sounded like an electric guitar. They're each playing different notes, representing a harmony and a melody. And it innovated on what we had before, which is one instrument. Now we have two instruments, or what sounds like two instruments. So the next style is 64-bit. This came after 16-bit. It's again named after the computing power of video game consoles such as the N64 and the PS1. And just to give you an idea, the previous console generations, they can compute 2D images. These consoles can compute 3D polygons, which is different from the previous consoles. And of course, sound quality improved. To give you an idea of what this sounds like, here's a track from Final Fantasy VII. So again, you actually hear three instruments. You hear horns, you hear another horn, and then you hear some sort of other instrument in the back of all of that, giving a mainstream bass. But it might sound very similar to 16-bit, although I will admit that later in the song there is a Latin chorus, which is something you can't do on the 16-bit track because it's live voices put into the music, which is something that hasn't happened with the previous two styles. Moving on, we have CGS. This is actually my term, what I use for any compressed video game music or any video game music created by a computer. You probably would hear it if you play a smartphone game or a console game. This style was actually first introduced on the DS, the GameCube, the Xbox, and the PS2. But to give you an idea of how powerful and emotional this style can be, here's an example from Pokemon Black and White. Sorry, wrong track. Well, actually, that was the wrong example I had. But that was actually an example of orchestra, which is live music, or any live music that wasn't altered by auto-tune. So as you heard, you could hear horns, you could hear a drum, you could hear another horn, and they all sound real. And that's because they were recorded with live instruments. I know this for a fact. The track came from Mariokart 8, so I apologize if the slide confused you. And this style originally came from the Wii. It could be done on the Wii, the PS3, and the Xbox 360. And I'm going to play this to make sure to see if we have the example from CGS. So exactly as I described before. Sorry we don't have an example for CGS. But it essentially sounds like you have your real instrument is playing, but at the same time, you could somehow figure out that it's not live instruments because of some other noise, or if you're a real sound maniac, you would tell the difference between a live piano and a computer-generated piano. So where is this going to go in the future? So as for new games, I think that they're going to use orchestra, CGS, a combo of the two, or depending on budget or what they want the game to sound like. As for a retro-themed game, that's a game supposed to have the feel of games of the past. They're going to probably aim for a soundtrack that sounds more like 8-bit, 16-bit, 64-bit, except it's not going to be those styles because they're merely trying to mimic it. They probably could try to make something that sounds like it, but it's never going to capture the real feel of those styles because of the processing powers of today. And as for purchasing this music, all I know right now is that there's only one video game series that actually puts their music onto iTunes for you to purchase, and that's Pokémon. Every other game series, I don't think you can purchase on iTunes or Google Play or any other service. So I hope that if people start enjoying this music, they will buy this music. Thank you.